Hello, friends and newcomers to the Uplifme podcast. I'm Katrina Pratt Roebuck, founder and CEO of Uplifme, and today I am talking to Cynthia Figueroa, who is the president and chief executive officer of JEVS Human Services. I am combining the interviews that I do with guests I interview on community connections and local legends because although Cynthia hasn't retired yet, she's still in the workforce, and I think she is already a local legend. Cynthia has a long list of credits to her name. She was a deputy mayor under the Kenney administration in Philadelphia, and she created the Office of Children and Families. She was the deputy commissioner and commissioner of the Department of Human Services, and her nonprofit work includes serving as the president and CEO of Congreso de Latinos Unidos and the executive director of Women Against Abuse. I met Cynthia 23 years ago when she was the CEO of Women Against Abuse, and Cynthia to this day serves on a host of boards and has served on the transition teams for Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and Philadelphia's Mayor Sherrell Parker. And in addition to all of that, she has received numerous awards and honors. So, welcome, Cynthia, and thank you so much for the opportunity to interview you.
Katrina, it's awesome to be here with you today and to see you and to know that our history goes longer than we care to admit because we're met maybe when we were 12 years old.
Exactly. We were only 12. That's exactly right. And you were wearing high heels at 12 in a very fashionable way. I must
Oh,
admit
thank
that was
you. I still try
one
to
of
rock
the
them.
initial things that I remember in meeting you. So thank you for making the time to meet. And I'm so excited to ask you these questions because I feel as though the work that you do is so impactful and changes thousands of lives. And you've changed the trajectory of social services in the city. But first, I want to start with your current work. So you are currently the CEO and president of JEVS Human Services. Can you give an overview of what JEVS does and who is served by JEVS?
Certainly. So JEVS Human Services has been around for 85 years. We were founded in Philadelphia really in response to a global crisis, and it was to help resettle Jews who were fleeing Nazi Germany. And so our work was really grounded in immigration and workforce from its start. Very
Okay.
shortly thereafter, we grew from that legacy, and subsequently we have become in the 85 years with two primary, I would say, pillars of our work. So there's education and workforce, and then there's behavioral health and human services. We have
Okay.
over 40 programs spanning 3 states, 2,000 staff, and probably about 40 programs. But all of that really is focused on creating economic independence and improving
Mhm.
individuals' quality of life. And what I would just say about the 85-year history of JEVS is it has constantly met the moment. So World War
Mhm.
II global crisis, civil rights movement, women's issues. There's just been a multitude of times, and even now, as we're dealing with the federal uncertainty, JEVS once again is meeting the moment to support those and the sector.
So I didn't realize that JEVS spanned 3 states and has such a large footprint. Can you talk a little bit about how people access those services?
Sure. We are a provider of services for both the state and city and the regions that we
Okay.
serve. So, for example, we run one of the career links for the state here in
Okay.
Philadelphia at a suburban station, and then we're also run the Work Ready program. So those are programs where they're directly fed through the PA, welfare offices that are directly connecting folks through the Department of Human Services. And then we're also word of mouth. A lot of our
Mhm.
programs are word of mouth. JEVS.org is our website. We do a lot of marketing and communication. We run a vocational tech college. And when I talk to those students, I'm like, oh, how'd you hear about us? They're like online. When I Googled, trade school to attend, you guys popped up. And then when I was looking for X, you popped up. So we do a lot of behind the scenes work to make sure that our information is reaching multitude of different audiences, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, you name it. We try to address the social media to span the complexity of all the individuals we serve, including being responsive to government.
So the economic mobility piece, I was aware of that piece, and I didn't realize that JEVS also did the behavioral health services piece. So can you talk a little bit about the community of people that are served? Are you primarily serving young folks that are trying to enter the workforce? What would you say is sort of the majority or crux of the services that JEVS provides?
I'm so glad you asked this question. So historically, we were really serving adults around the workforce, and that's
Okay.
individuals without credentials, meaning they don't have a high school diploma, they don't have an associate's degree, and they're looking to enter into the workforce. And we would work with folks all the way into their senior, like 55 plus community who's trying to get employment, as well as folks who have intellectual disabilities who are trying to get employment. So the
Okay.
workforce is very deep. In the last 2 to 3 years, we have now been serving older youth. So we have become the intermediary for a program the city has called C2L PHL, Career Connected Learning. That's the old youth summer employment program. It now's year round. So we serve over 8,000 kids in the summer and about 2 to 3,000 during the school year. And so that's also a workforce track. So now I would say our venue of workforce spans from the ages of 12 to all the way to your senior years in up until retirement. So that our workforce is pretty deep in terms of its approach.
Mhm. So, just a little personal aside, my son, who's 12, brought home a paper and said, Mom, I want to join this summer work program. And it was your program through JEVS. And I said, I know the person that runs that.
I know. Well, I have to tell you, I'm glad you're not one of the moms that's calling me right now. It is a program that's been in such demand, and we've had such great
Yeah.
success with the city, Philadelphia workforce, and the school
Mhm.
district that for every one application we can say yes to, we have to say it another. So last
Mm.
year we had 7,000 slots and 14,000 kids applied. This
Wow.
year we expanded those slots and we had 8,000 slots for the summer through the C2L program that we run, and we had over 16,000 applicants.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was really pleased when he told me he was interested in it, took the initiative. And then I was like, Jebs, of course, right? And so I'm so happy just as a mother, as a parent, that he is in a program that you're running. That
Oh,
gives
that's
me
great.
personal
I'm glad to
confidence. It
hear
does.
that.
Yeah,
And what a
yeah, yeah.
great opportunity for him too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I'll let you know how it goes. You also mentioned a little earlier that JEVS meets the moment, and you said JEVS is meeting the moment now. Can you talk a little bit about what that means in the nonprofit space?
Sure. So in the shadow of the really difficult impact that the new federal administration, avoiding names, in January of 2025, we had a switch right in our presidential administration. And really shortly after the inauguration, there were immediately directives coming out, creating a lot of chaos in the sector. The first thing that came out was a memo saying that all funding was being paused until the president's priorities were addressed.
Right.
At the time, we convened a group of about 15 or 20 leaders who'd been talking about other infrastructure issues and created shortly thereafter what we call the Nonprofit Leaders Group. That has now mushroomed into 250 plus members who are part of it, with close to 200 organizations. And we meet bi-weekly to really deconstruct the myths or realities of what the executive orders, federal policy, local policy, and bring resources and expert speakers to the sector. Part of the strategy, in my opinion, is to create chaos, unbalance the system. So you're running around trying to figure out, can you even operate? And so what we've hoped to do through the Nonprofit Leaders Group is really to create an environment where there's credible, vetted information, that you know where to find resources, and that you're preparing yourself for the dynamics that may come while advocating for changes that we need to see around policies or holding on to policies we don't want to lose.
Right, right. And so if a nonprofit is not a part of the group, is it an open group that other nonprofits can join? And if so, how could they join?
Yes, so on JEVS.org, and you go under About Us, it
Okay.
has the nonprofit leaders group. So there's a form that you fill out. The
Okay.
only requirement is that you're in a leadership role at a nonprofit. And so we have multiple representatives, sometimes from the same organization,
Okay.
Friday morning meetings. So it's a really great thing. And the other dynamic is that we have a parallel process where we have a group of philanthropic partners who
Okay.
we also pulled together, so it can be sort of a voice or a liaison to the philanthropic community. There's no guarantee of funding, but it helps at
Sure.
least create a constant, you know, communication
Mhm.
connection between what's happening on the ground, what are we hearing, and is philanthropy sort of aligned with what the needs are of the sector.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you are providing that space and that convening for folks to have the support of each other. And then also to your point around the different, oftentimes silos that we see,
Yeah.
making sure that there's a cross-sector conversation. So, okay, so I want to transition now to you. And I have had the opportunity, right, to watch you over 23 years and your amazing trajectory. So, I wanted to also ask you because I think that people who are coming up in social services have questions about how to be effective, what works. And I think that you're a wonderful example of being able to have taken your experiences and built on them. So, I think I want to start by asking you, tell us what drew you to social services in the beginning.
Um, I have to say, without going back when I was born, but my parents had a huge, huge impact on why I am involved in social services. They're both products of very difficult households and difficult upbringing. My father was a product of what you would now call kinship care. They didn't call it that back then. And my mother grew up in a very abusive situation, both, my mother, abject poverty, my father, definitely working poor. And they got involved in the Peace Corps. They met through that. My mom is actually from Central America, and I was actually born in Puerto Rico. So I was born out of social justice. They were involved in the Peace Corps when we were all born in Puerto Rico. And even though my sisters and I later on were like, did you know we grew up kind of poor? Like, we had so much love in our house and so much creativity that I don't think we realized the struggles and the sacrifices our parents were making along the way. All those dots start getting connected when you start having these experiences. And I think the first time I went to colleges and I realized the vast socioeconomic differences that existed because I had lived in a certain environment and I lived in a certain community and like a lot of the kids. So I was a first generation. My first language was Spanish. We had to use like coupons and stamps and all the government opportunities. I went to free camps. I did all the things that now later in life, I have been in the seat of making sure funding and access is there. And so I see myself in a lot of, my first job in Philadelphia was at Congreso. And I thought, that was an extension of my experience, that I was a family that came with nothing. My parents had like nothing in their pockets. And it was family and support and resources that helped them establish the life. My father was a school teacher and my mother worked in retail. That's it. They put three girls through college and have been really successful. That kind of American dream is deteriorating, right? So a low middle income families' ability to see access of success through education, so anyways, it is a personal passion of mine of why I got into this work. And it quickly, I think just escalated by wanting to make sure there was more I could do. So I went from doing direct service to, kind of growing the trajectory because the more you could impact, the greater sort of people you were helping.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that lived experience, right, that you have in making the decisions, right, really then meets people where they are because you were there,
Yeah.
right? And you know what it felt like and you
Yep.
saw it and you breathed it. And I think that that is so important. Um, you have a lot of accomplishments, but I want you to talk a little bit, if you would, about some of the things that you've accomplished that you're particularly proud of and why.
When I look back, and like I said, I hate to, it's one of those things you want to never, I still feel like I'm like a baby in this work, but at the same time, when I look back and say, geez, we did that and we created those things, I'm most proud that I was able to leave a seed that is a legacy program or a vital resource that to this day operates. And so,
Mm,
an example of that is Women Against Abuse,
mm,
helping to create the unified toll-free 1-800 well, it's 866, hotline number for the city of Philadelphia.
Hmm.
Prior to that, it was like 4 independent lines. And so
Oh, wow.
consolidating, working with all the partners at the city, it was actually Rob Hess through the Office of Homeless Services at the time,
Yes, yes.
and Roberta Cancelliere and other folks who were really willing to be very proactive. And so we created the domestic violence hotline. So that's a whole story. But doing that still to this day, that there's a toll-free number in Philadelphia, I feel really proud that that has remained and continued at Congresso. We were awarded a federally qualified health center that still operates at Congresso and Pan American Charter School, moving to a new campus that happened during my tenure, and that building is like a symbol to growing a campus in Eastern North Philadelphia. And then going on to my city work, establishing the Education Support Center, which was looking at the educational needs of kids who are involved in the system and trying to improve their educational outcomes. The Education Support Center still exists. It's a model that's looked to. And then, developing the Office of the Children and Families and integrating services for youth and the PHL programs, like all of these things that are still operating that, I felt like I had a hand in with teams of people who were really involved. I think that feels like those are elements of legacies. And
Sure.
just talked about more recently, the two things that I think we're building here is the youth employment system
Hmm.
will be, I think, another piece of that. And then I don't know what the future is for the nonprofit leaders group, but we're certainly, I think the capacity of the sector is an important one that I'm very interested in. So I'm just proud that because of tenacity and tremendous
Hmm.
teams,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
there were these systems and programs that were built that are still in place.
Yeah, and that is impressive and has served countless numbers of lives in positive ways. And so I think you said that you and teams were able to put this work together. What do you think has been vital to you and the teams that you've led or been a part of to be effective? What has been vital to that effectiveness, do you think?
One of the things that I think female leaders in particular do is the availability to have a vulnerability in recognizing that you're not the expert in everything. So I have always built teams with people who I believe are smarter and brighter than me. Or if that I'm looking to do something in the health space, or if I'm looking to do something in IT or whatever, that I don't need to be the one who holds the information. I need to help guide that team, but I want to find the best of the best. So I think what I've done is always find people that are smarter and have expertise in those areas and harness their expertise alongside with other strong members, because having independent actors isn't also going to be a team. You're going to have
Yeah.
independent experts. The other secret sauce that I have is very early on in my career, being mentored by other tremendous women. I had access to a coach, a professional coach, and I have had a professional coach my entire career. And I think
Mhm.
people think you arrive and that you don't need coaching anymore. And I don't believe that. I think to be an effective leader, you have to be constantly in a space of wanting to learn about yourself. Leadership evolves constantly, and you have to reshape how you lead, because you might be leading bigger teams or different systems, and you don't hold that information. And so folks, assuming that they can do it or they've gotten somewhere and they have enough experience that they don't need help in improving themselves, I think can be a false approach. So my approach has been like, I still have stuff to learn about being a good leader, and that I'm always open to learning more about myself so I can be an effective leader to my team.
So I didn't know what you were going to say in answering that question, but I'm so glad to have heard those answers because I think what it shows is humility and the strength in your humility, right?
Mm,
A lot of times people may feel threatened or may want to be the shining star because they think that that's what they need to do to be effective and get, whatever accolades they think are needed. And then also to share being in professional development continuously. I think that is so important. And I really do think that you saying that will give permission to other people to say it's okay for me to continually learn and to always need to have a support. And I think that that's true throughout various areas of our lives. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's very powerful what you shared just about your trajectory. If you could wave a magic wand, what would be something? Now, you've worked in government and nonprofit, so you
Yeah,
kind of have the insides on both ways. That's why
yeah,
you are
yeah.
community connections and local legends. What would you, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you create enough of to
Hmm.
meet a critical need in the city?
So first I want to, because I'm a junkie for using data to inform answers, and part of what we've been doing with the nonprofit leaders group is the importance of the strength of a sector. So I'm very much, it's almost like that famous Chinese proverb, that if you help a child and you help a community and you help a neighborhood and you help a state and a region and so it's like if you have peace in the world, it's kind of this like scaling up and scaling down.
Mm,
And so
mm,
I've had this kind of vision more recently, which is if we have a strong sector, meaning the nonprofit sector that plays a vital role, then you can have strong communities, strong individuals, strong children and families. So the strength of the sector is really critical, and we shouldn't be about saving organizations that are financially struggling, but the nonprofit sector in Philadelphia plays a really interesting role. So consider this: 30% of the workforce in our entire region works for a nonprofit. 30%. Now that includes eds and meds, and so they take up a
mm,
big piece of it, but
mm,
that tells you now, because we're so old, we're celebrating our 250th.
mm,
Philadelphia has privatized and outsourced a lot of its work and has for a long time, way before the community umbrella agencies.
mm.
The nonprofit sector does work on behalf of government because of its
Right.
connection to the community, its nimbleness, etc. That's different in other cities and even other counties. Work that's done by the sector is often done by government. So I say all that to say that if I had a magic wand,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
believe that there is the need to not, have an endless amount of funding, but that the nonprofits need to be properly funded. And what I mean by that is that there's systemic challenges that limit the administrative rates that are paid to nonprofits that are, um, what's the word? There's no reason they're held to a certain standard. They could be raised, and that's an advocacy piece we've been doing. Our minimum wage in the state of Pennsylvania is $7.25. Even our own city has a requirement to be above $15. The
Right.
contracts that are provided to deliver some of the most important work doesn't provide that. Some of the most complicated work of people who are doing direct service professional work, um, it's $15 to $17 an hour when we know the living wage is $23 to $25 an hour. So, anyways, I say that all to say that I'm not saying there should be like a blank check and that people get all the money in the world, but for the sector to be strong, it has to be appropriately funded. And we're not prioritizing that. We're prioritizing a lot of other things over taking care of those who are taking care of the most vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah. And I do think, yeah, Philadelphia is has the minimum of $15, as you said. And I think Philadelphia is trying to continually move that up. But I do think that to your point, funding sectors so that they can do the work adequately is super important. Um, I'd like to end by asking you, talking to a group of people, and a number of people will see this interview. What words of wisdom do you have for all of us in the thick of our careers to be impactful?
I think in this moment, authenticity is really
Mm,
important. and that in order to do so, it requires a lot of self-reflection. And the other thing I have been able to balance in my career, which is harder, particularly at this time, is to be courageous. And, I have found in my career that sometimes it's really hard to stand on the side of right. As obvious as it seems, you can lose support, connections, advocacy, because folks are afraid to stand with you when you're fighting for something that is courageous. So it could put folks in conflict, or you have to take a side, and folks don't want to because you don't want to upset the apple cart, right? I just want to,
Right.
status quo. If I stay here, my funding's not going to be impacted. I'm not going to upset this person. So I do think that authenticity is real, that courage is real. And this comes with maybe leaning into the legacy part of my life, is that you have to be prepared to give a lot of grace.
Mhm.
There's a lot of reactiveness that's happening right now. And I'm finding in this moment that the advice I give my team is context is important, what's going on for that person, what's going on with the full situation, like what can we sort of extract of what's really happening before we react.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think that, to your point around having to take a stand, or a side, right, that can be scary. And until you're in that position to have to make that choice, it may not be as easy as it seems. But
And
go ahead. No, no,
I
sorry.
mean, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say just one more thing, which is I think
Yeah.
I don't do this enough, but I've been trying to practice it more, is that you have to be really kind to yourself. It's very, very lonely to be in a leadership position. It's very lonely to be an ethnic woman leader. The bigger, higher up you go, the less women you find. And you really have to give yourself a lot of grace.
Yeah. I think that when we talk about well-being a lot, and particularly as women, I think that that's one of the things that we certainly have to be more vigilant about is giving ourselves grace and kindness. So thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing at JEVS. And I really appreciate you spending time with me today.
You know what, Katrina? I am so glad you asked me to do this. I am so happy to see your light shine and see you in a space like this that really, I think, is elevating your skills and strengths. And so the fact that you're bringing such important information and talking to friends and colleagues, I think is a real tribute to what you've built as well. So you should really take the flowers that are being offered to you, because you, my friend, have grown significantly. And it's really just wonderful to see.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you. I appreciate you. Take care.
Likewise. Likewise. Bye.
Bye.